Kyla Ramirez tightened the knot on her work boots and stared at her reflection in the dirty staff restroom mirror. Her navy blue uniform, thick and shapeless, hung loosely over her frame. The name patch above her chest read, Kayla, stitched in faded white thread. She took a deep breath and wiped her palms on her thighs, even though they were already dry. "Let's get this over with," she murmured to herself. She pushed open the door and stepped into the hallway of the same high school she graduated from just over a year ago. The walls were still painted that familiar beige with chipped green borders. Her sneakers squeaked slightly against the polished tile as she pushed the janitor's cart down the corridor. It felt like walking through a memory that refused to stay sweet. This was the same building where she gave her valedictorian speech, where her teachers once praised her as college-bound and future Ivy League. The same place where she made a promise on stage, "I'll make this town proud." Now she was just the girl with the mop. Her first shift began before sunrise, and she tried to finish as much as she could before the students arrived. But by 8 a.m., the bell rang and the hallways flooded with life backpacks slamming into lockers, sneakers stomping, chatter bouncing off the walls. Kayla kept her head down as she pushed her cart past a group of students waiting outside. A classroom. One of them squinted at her. "Wait, is that Kayla Ramirez?" he whispered to his friend. The other turned. His eyebrows lifted with cruel amusement. "No way," he said under his breath. "She used to win all the awards. Now, she's cleaning gum off desks?" They snickered just loud enough for her to hear. She didn't flinch. She didn't look up. But the blood rushed hot behind her ears. She made it to the science wing and began scrubbing a cluster of desks that still had dried soda rings on the surface. The janitor closet was a few feet away. She could hide in there if she had to. Just for a moment. Just until her heart stopped pounding. But she didn't single quotes T. Instead. She moved to the next desk. Lunchtime was worse. The cafeteria had always been loud, but now every clang of a tray or burst of laughter felt like a spotlight on her. Students walked past her like she didn't exist, except for the ones who remembered. One girl, wearing a cheer uniform, sat at the edge of a table and nudged her friend. "Isn't that the girl who got accepted into, like, some Ivy League school?" "What happened?" Another student chimed in, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Guess she flunked out. Probably couldn't handle it." Laughter erupted. Kayla wiped the same section of table 3 times. Her hands moved mechanically, as if separating herself from her own body could numb the sting. She wanted to say something, to defend herself, to scream, "You don't know what I've given up." But instead, she held her tongue, like she always had. Back in her senior year, people used to come to her for help. Teachers handed her extra credit assignments to review. Students asked her to proofread essays. The principal had called her a role model for what determination looks like. Now she was invisible. Or worse, a punchline. During her break, she sat alone behind the school near the dumpsters. The smell didn't bother her. The quiet was worth it. She scrolled through her phone, avoiding social media. She didn't want to see what her former classmates were doing. Photos of dorm rooms, internships, parties, smiles. The future she thought she was supposed to have. But then her screen lit up with a photo, a memory. She and Luis, her older brother, standing side by side in front of the Army recruiting office. He had just enlisted. She wore a graduation cap. He wore dog tags. They were both beaming. He had been her hero, her protector, and her best friend. He was supposed to come back. Instead, they sent back a box and a flag dot, and now it was her turn to protect the family. Their mother's medical bills swallowed every savings. Their dad had already left long before Luis did. Kyla didn't hesitate. She turned down the scholarship, took custody of her 2 younger siblings, found work any work. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't want pity. She didn't want to explain Dot, so she cleaned, because it paid, because it kept the lights on, because it was the only way she knew how to keep her family together. When she returned to the cafeteria later that afternoon, the laughter had mostly died down. The tables were emptier. Students had dispersed. But 2 girls still sat by the window, snickering at something on their phone. As Kayla passed, one of them turned the screen toward her. Dot. It was a blurry photo of her, hunched over, cleaning. The caption read, "From cap and gown to mop and bucket. Hashtag fall from grace." They laughed again, not maliciously. More like it was just another meme. Another thing to scroll past. Kayla stared at the photo. Dot, then calmly reached over, picked up a discarded milk carton, and dropped it into the trash bag on her cart. She walked away in silence, but something in her eyes, cold and steady, left the girls uneasy. They didn't know the story beneath her collar. They didn't know what her uniform really meant, and they certainly didn't know what the tattoo under it would reveal. Not yet. The cafeteria roared like a jungle. Metal trays clattered against tables. Sneakers squeaked across the floor, and conversations exploded in all directions. At the far end of the room, Kayla Ramirez worked quietly, wiping tables and stacking chairs, trying to disappear into the background. But silence wasn't granted to people in uniforms like hers. She moved efficiently, cloth in one hand, a spray bottle in the other. Her gloves squeaked slightly as she leaned across a table smeared with ketchup. She was halfway through cleaning when the noise shifted. Not louder, but more pointed. Focused. A group of students at the central table had gone quiet for a moment. Then came the first whisper. "Yo, ... That's Kayla, right? Kayla Ramirez?" A boy with bleached hair said, squinting toward her. A girl next to him, her eyeliner sharp enough to cut, turned. "No way." "Is it really?" Another voice chimed in. "I thought she was in college. Didn't she, win awards or something?" Boy let out a short, barking laugh. "Yeah, apparently she's winning Employee of the Month now. Janitor of the Year." Laughter broke out at the table, echoing just loud enough to slice through the chatter around them. Kyla heard it. Every word. She kept her back to them, eyes locked on a sticky soda stain that didn't really need that much scrubbing, but gave her an excuse not to look up. Her heart beat faster, but her face stayed calm, like always. Seriously, though. Another student said, scrolling through her phone. "I remember her valedictorian speech. She cried during it. Said she was gonna change the world. Guess she meant one trash can at a time," someone added. More laughter. This time, louder, crueler. Kayla moved on to the next table. She didn't cry. Not here. Not now. She had learned, painfully, that silence protected better than words ever could. But across the cafeteria, 2 students kept staring, not laughing. A quiet freshman named Malik recognized her immediately. His older sister had shown him. Picture of Kayla the night before her, standing on stage in a white cap and gown, shaking hands with the principal. He leaned to his friend. "You know she was supposed to go to Columbia." His friend raised an eyebrow. "Like New York Columbia?" "Yeah," Malik whispered. "Smart as hell. I don't know what happened." Kayla noticed them watching her, but there was no mockery in their eyes. Just curiosity, hesitation, the kind she used to see in kids when they approached her for tutoring. She felt a pang deep in her chest. She missed that version of herself. The girl with purpose. The girl with a plan. She walked back to the janitor's closet and refilled her cleaning solution. As she bent over the sink, her name echoed from the cafeteria, again louder this time. "Kyla." "Hey, Kayla." Someone called Mockingly. She didn't. respond. A boy walked toward her, holding up his phone with an exaggerated grin. You mind if I grab a selfie? Want to show people how our school hires Ivy League dropouts now. Another round of laughter erupted behind him. Kayla turned slowly. For a moment, something flickered in her expression, so brief it was almost imperceptible. Not anger, not sadness, just a quiet, cold resolve. No, she said simply. The boy blinked, surprised she answered. No, what? No, you can't take a photo of me. Her voice was even steady. Go finish your lunch. She turned and walked away, not waiting for a reaction. The boy stood frozen for a second, then muttered, whatever, and walked back to his table. Kayla returned to her cart, grabbing another rag. Her hands moved automatically, but inside. Her head, a storm swirled. Not just because of the laughter, but because of how easily they dismissed her humanity. As if the uniform erased everything she used to be. She thought of her mom, lying in the hospital bed 3 months ago, holding Kayla's hand and whispering, I don't want to leave them without someone. Kayla didn't hesitate. She withdrew. From college the next day. Took a full-time job 2 weeks later. No goodbyes, no explanations. No time for that. Now, here she was mopping floors where she once walked in heels. And confidence. The day dragged on. When the bell rang at 3 o'clock, students flooded the hallways again, chatting, texting, laughing, many of them not giving her a second glance. But some did, and those were the ones who bothered her most. The ones who recognized her, who used to sit beside her in AP chemistry, who voted her most likely to succeed, who once borrowed her notes and praised her brilliance. Now, they walked past without a word. As if failure was contagious. As if they didn't want to be reminded that ambition wasn't always enough. Back in the supply room, she peeled off her gloves and wiped sweat from her brow. She looked in the small mirror again. Her face looked older, sharper, less hopeful, but not weak. Never weak. As she turned to leave, her collar shifted slightly, just enough to expose the edge of black ink beneath the fabric. Student walking by caught a glimpse, just a flash of a wingtip etched into skin. He paused. Then kept walking. Kayla didn't notice. Not yet, but soon. The laughter would stop. Because her uniform held a secret, and her tattoo barely hidden beneath. The collarbone was a story none of them were ready to hear. When the shift ended and the hallways finally emptied, Kayla Ramirez lingered alone in the janitor's supply room, where the buzz of fluorescent lights hummed above her. She sat on an overturned crate, elbows resting on her knees as she stared at a dusty motivational poster peeling off the back wall. Success is a journey, not a destination. She scoffed. It was easy for people to talk about journeys when they never had to choose between a dream and a dying parent. Outside the small window, the sun had started to set, painting streaks of orange and rose gold across the sky. Golden hour used to be her favorite time. It was the hour she'd sit with Lise on the porch, talking about the future. His military boots crossed at the ankle, her notebooks spread open in her lap. He called her Harvard even before she applied anywhere. Whatever you do, he told her once, never settle. You were born to aim higher. And she had, until everything changed. The memories came flooding, back like water breaking through a dam. It was the week before her senior prom. Kayla was walking home from school, headphones in, when her phone buzzed in her pocket. A hospital number. Her heart sank. She already knew what it meant. Her mother, who had complained about persistent stomach pain for months, had collapsed at her part-time job at the grocery store. The diagnosis came quickly. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Advanced. Aggressive. She sat at her mother's bedside later that night, the machines beeping rhythmically beside them. You need to go, her mother whispered. You have dreams to chase. But Kayla shook her head. No, I'm staying. I'll take care of everything. You were meant for something more than this, Kayla. I was meant to be your daughter, she said. That's more than enough. Within 3 months, everything Kayla had built, the future she had carefully mapped out, came crashing down. The acceptance letter from Columbia arrived the same day her mother's treatment plan did. Chemotherapy, hospice, home care. Costs she couldn't even calculate. Her younger siblings, Mateo and Ava, were barely out of middle school. Their eyes were too wide, too scared, looking to her for direction. Her father had left years ago, disappearing without explanation or obligation. She was 18, and suddenly she was the only adult left in the house. She declined the scholarship without telling anyone. Not even her closest teachers knew. She told the school she'd be delaying enrollment. Just a gap year. That was easier than explaining the full truth. That she had to be the cook, the caretaker, the guardian, and the income. All in one. She applied for jobs that didn't care about her GPA or essays or dreams. And she got one. Right. Back at the school that once celebrated her brilliance. It was humiliating at first, coming back, not as a success story, but as a shadow in work boots. Her own classmates still roamed the halls. Her name still sat under the top achievers. Photo in the trophy case. She passed it every morning and forced herself not to look. But over time, she stopped caring about what they thought. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know what it meant to grow up overnight, to pay utility bills with money saved for books, to put your mother's comfort above your own ambition, to stand by your siblings when the world went silent. And they definitely didn't know about Louise. The tattoo beneath her collarbone ached as if remembering. Louise had joined the army right after high school, not out of patriotism, but necessity. They were dirt poor back then, and he wanted to give Kayla the kind of future he couldn't afford for himself. He mailed her letters during basic training, always with drawings in the margins, eagles, stars, wings. He called her Kid Genius and promised to be at her college graduation, no matter what. When the news came, Kayla was baking lasagna for Ava's birthday. The knock on the door changed everything. 2 men in uniform, stone faces. One holding a folded flag. SGT Lise Ramirez was killed in action. She didn't hear the rest. The world faded into a dull ringing, like a bomb had gone off somewhere inside her. He had died protecting a group of civilians during a raid in Afghanistan. He stepped into open fire to shield them, drawing the enemy's attention long enough for his unit to evacuate a mother and her child. Lise died the way he lived, putting others first. Weeks later, Kayla took the bus across town to a tattoo shop and asked for an eagle in full flight with 3 letters beneath it. KIA, killed in action. And under that, SGTL Ramirez. The pain of the needle was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. She wanted it close to her heart. She wanted to carry him with her, literally and forever. That's the tattoo hidden beneath her collarbone. The one no one knew about. The one that would silence every voice that ever mocked her. But she never showed it, because Kayla didn't want sympathy. She wanted strength. She wanted her siblings to grow up in a house with lights that stayed on. She wanted to make sure they finished school, that Eva had clean clothes for cheerleading tryouts, that Mateo didn't skip meals when the fridge got low. And if that meant scrubbing tables in her old school cafeteria, then so be it. Her dignity wasn't tied to a degree. It was tattooed in sacrifice. And soon, whether they laughed or not, they'd know exactly who she was and who she fought for. The following Monday, the bell rang like a warning bell. Kayla wheeled her cart through the east hallway, as usual, head down, focused. The building smelled of old pencils, dusty radiators, and cafeteria pizza. It was a scent she once associated with potential. Now it was just another part of her daily battlefield. The whisper started again, before first period. There she is. Still here. I bet she regrets turning down that scholarship. She probably dropped out. Can't hang. She'd heard it all before. The same tired chorus. But for some reason, today felt different. Maybe it was the storm outside rain, tapping violently on the windows like it wanted in. Maybe it was how little sleep she got last night after Ava's asthma attack. Or maybe it was because she finally felt tired of carrying everyone else's expectations like a backpack full of bricks. Whatever it was, something shifted. She reached the science wing early to clean before the lab session. As she worked, she noticed a new poster on the bulletin board. Veterans Week, share your story. Beneath the words were photos, mostly students with military relatives. A few were smiling beside grandfathers or older brothers in uniform. One boy was next to his father. A Marine. Her chest tightened. Lise would have looked good in that photo board. He always said if they ever asked for stories, he'd let her tell it for him. You've got the words, kid genius, he'd say. I've got the scars. She stared at the poster for a full minute, then moved on. She had trash cans to empty. At lunch, the cafeteria felt like a pressure cooker. Kyla moved between tables with practiced ease, dodging fries on the floor and spilled juice boxes. The usual kids were loud today. Too loud. She could feel their eyes following her again. She reached their table, and sure enough, the same girl with sharp eyeliner smirked. Hey, Kayla, you missed a spot, she said, pointing beneath the table. Kayla crouched to wipe it, staying quiet, until another girl added, You know, it's kinda sad. All those brains wasted. Kayla stood slowly. She locked eyes with the girl, calmly, too calmly. Tell me, she said, voice low but clear. What exactly have you done with your brains? The girl blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me? You mock people who work. You laugh at things you don't understand. But have you ever taken care of someone who couldn't take care of themselves? Paid bills while finishing homework? Buried your best friend and still showed up the next morning? Her tone didn't rise. She didn't shout, but every syllable struck like a hammer. The whole table went silent. Kayla turned and walked away, but the silence followed her like a ghost. That moment, when she chose not to shrink, rippled through the cafeteria like a dropped tray. Later that afternoon, she passed by the auditorium on her way to the mop closet. Something made her stop. Veterans Week event had begun. Students and teachers gathered in small clusters near the entrance, pinning photos and letters to a corkboard. Someone had brought a flag. A history teacher stood at the front with a microphone, reading aloud quotes from soldiers about bravery, loss, and legacy. Kayla hovered at the back. She didn't plan to go in, but then she saw it. An empty section at the center of the photo board, labeled In Memory. No pictures, no notes. Just space. Her throat tightened. Luis deserved that space. All of it. For once, she walked past the boundary she usually stayed behind. She stepped into the auditorium. Some students turned. A few whispered, but most didn't recognize her. She found the teacher running the event. He blinked at her, surprised. Can I add a photo? She asked, almost hesitant. He nodded. Of course. She reached into her wallet and pulled out the only thing she kept from Luce's last letter. A photo of him in uniform, smiling under the New Mexico sun, one hand resting over his heart. She pinned it up. And when she turned around, some students gasped, not at the photo, but at her. The rain had soaked through her jacket. It clung to her skin. And when she removed it to hang by the heater, the collar of her work shirt slipped, just enough to reveal it. The tattoo. An eagle in mid-flight, wings wide, fierce and noble. Beneath it, SG2 Ramirez KIA. One girl near the front gasped audibly. didn't try to hide it. For the first time, she let them see not the janitor, not the dropout, but the sister of a hero, the girl who stayed behind to keep a family alive. The one who exchanged dorm rooms for hospital chairs, scholarships for double shifts. The room went quiet. Even the ones who mocked her couldn't look away. It wasn't the ink that stung them. It was the weight behind it. The cost, the story. Kayla didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The tattoo spoke louder than anything, and it was only the beginning. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but something else lingered in the air like electricity before a storm. Kyla walked through the halls with her usual cart, but this time, things were different. Students didn't laugh. They looked. Some stared. Some lowered their eyes as she passed. Others whispered in hushed voices, as if afraid she might hear them, though part of her wished they'd say something out loud. The silence was heavier than mockery. As she approached the science wing, she heard her name not in a taunting voice this time, but hesitant, unsure. Kyla? She turned. It was Malik, the quiet freshman who had once recognized her, the one whose sister had shown him her graduation photo. He was holding a stack of books, his backpack half unzipped. I saw the photo you pinned yesterday, he said. That was your brother? Kayla gave a soft nod. Luis. Yeah. He shifted his weight awkwardly. He sounded like someone I'd want to know. You would have liked him, she said, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. He believed in people, even when they didn't believe in themselves. Malik smiled back, then lowered his voice. I'm sorry people treated you like a joke. That wasn't right. Kayla didn't respond right away. Instead, she glanced at the janitor's closet, then back at him. Sometimes people don't understand what they're looking at, she said. They see the surface, the uniform, and make up the rest. He nodded, eyes down. Yeah, my cousin's in the army. He's got a tattoo like yours. He never talks about it, though. Some stories sit under your skin, Kyla said gently. Doesn't mean they're any less real. As she turned to leave, Malik called after her again. Hey, if you ever want to talk about him, or about anything, really, I'd listen. Kayla paused for a beat, surprised. Then, thanks, Malik. That moment was the first spark. By lunchtime, more sparks followed. When she entered the cafeteria, it wasn't silence that greeted her, but a new kind of murmur. I heard her brother died in Afghanistan. She gave up Colombia to take care of her family. Can you believe that? She's not a janitor, she's a warrior. The same table that once mocked her now sat quieter, unsure. One girl, yes, the same one with the sharp eyeliner, watched Kayla with a strange mix of guilt and curiosity. She didn't smirk, didn't make a snide comment, just stared. Kayla continued her routine. Quiet, professional, but inside, her thoughts buzzed. This was new. Not praise, not pity, but recognition. People were beginning to understand that her story had weight, that her uniform wasn't a symbol of failure. It was a choice made from love, sacrifice, and survival. By last period, the whispers had grown into questions. Mr. Daniels, the history teacher who had hosted the Veterans Week event, stopped her in the hallway. Kayla, he said gently. A few students asked if we could invite someone to speak at the assembly on Friday. Someone who's lived it. She raised an eyebrow. Lived what? Sacrifice, service, family. He waited. She folded her arms, skeptical. You want me to speak? He nodded. You don't have to. But I think they'd listen. For a long moment, Kayla stared at the floor. I'm not a soldier, she said. No, he replied, but you carry a soldier's story. And you carry it well. Later that evening, Kayla sat at the kitchen table, her siblings working on homework beside her. The house smelled faintly of rice and beans, comfort food, the kind their mother used to make Doc Mateo looked up. Someone at school said you were going to talk at an assembly. Kayla blinked. Who told you that? Malik, he said. He's in my math class. He said you're like a legend now. Eva giggled. You are kind of famous. Kayla rolled her eyes. I don't want to be famous. Too late, Eva said with a grin. Your tattoo is basically famous already. Kayla looked down at the spot just below her collarbone, hidden again by her shirt. The eagle rested there silently. Wings spread as always. She had gotten the tattoo for herself, for Luis. She never expected anyone else to see it, much less be changed by it. But maybe it was time. Maybe people needed to hear the story not for her, but for every kid who ever made a hard choice and was laughed at for it. For every person who wore a uniform and got overlooked. For every sacrifice made in silence. That night, she sat down with a pen and a blank piece of paper. She didn't write a speech. She wrote a truth, and truth always found a way to speak for itself. Friday came faster than Kyla expected. The day of the veterans. Assembly. She spent the morning as she always did scrubbing locker room floors, mopping up spilled milk in the cafeteria, replacing the roll of paper towels that always went missing in the boys' bathroom. Her boots echoed down the quiet hallway before school started, her mind racing louder than her steps. The speech was in her pocket, folded twice. Ink smudged where her hand had rested too long while writing it. She hadn't shown it to anyone. Not Mateo, not Eva, not even Malik, who had asked with wide, hopeful eyes what she might say. Truth was, she almost didn't want to say anything at all. Not the idea of standing on that stage, where she'd once accepted academic awards and scholarships felt. Like walking back into the battlefield of everything she'd lost. Her old self, her dreams, her place, that something in her knew this mattered. Not just for Louise Dot, but for the girl who used to walk these same halls believing her future was limitless. That girl still lived somewhere inside her. And maybe, just maybe today, was the day to let her breathe again. At 10 a.m. The bell rang for the assembly. The auditorium filled quickly, students filing in by grade, teachers lining the walls. A display of flags hung behind the stage, red, white, and blue rippling gently in the breeze from the ceiling fans. Mr. Daniels welcomed everyone and began with a brief history lesson honoring local veterans, reading names of alumni who served in various wars. Then he paused. This year, he said, we have a very special guest. Someone you may have walked past in the hallway without ever realizing the strength of her story. Today, she's agreed to share it with us. He stepped aside. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd as Kyla stood. She wasn't in her uniform. The first time in months, she wore something else. A navy blue blouse and pressed black slacks. Her boots still scuffed, but polished. Simple, strong. The collar of her shirt dipped, just low enough that the edge of her tattoo peeked out like a shadow beneath her skin. She stepped onto the stage slowly, steadily, and then the auditorium went silent. The same kids who used to laugh leaned forward in their seats. The same teachers who once praised her brilliance now looked at her with something deeper than admiration, respect. Kayla reached the podium, unfolded the paper, and looked out over the crowd. Her hands didn't shake, not her voice didn't crack. She began. Most of you know me as the janitor. You see me in the background mopping, sweeping, cleaning up messes you forget you made. What you don't know is that I once sat where you sit now. I was student council president, honor roll every year, early acceptance to Columbia University. Had plans. Then life made other plans. She paused. A few students blinked. One teacher put a hand over her heart. My mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer during my senior year. I dropped out of Columbia before I ever stepped foot on campus. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because my family needed me more. My siblings were just kids. There was no one else. I took this job so I could pay bills, keep food on the table, and keep the lights on in our house. I took this job to survive, and I don't regret a single second of it. There was a stillness in the air that almost hummed. But I'm not just here because of what I gave up. I'm here because of who I lost. My older brother, Luis Ramirez SGT. Ramirez was killed in action overseas while protecting civilians. During an ambush, he never made it home, but he left me with something that will never fade. She touched the edge of her tattoo, now clearly visible under the lights. This eagle? It's not just ink, it's flight. It's freedom. It's his story. And now it's mine. I wear it close to my heart, because that's where he always was, and always will be. In the audience, someone sniffed lead. Another girl quietly wiped a tear from her cheek. You don't always get to choose your path, but you always get to choose your reason. I chose family. I chose love. And while I may wear a different kind of uniform, now, make no mistake, this is not failure. This is strength. This is sacrifice. This is victory on different terms. She looked out into the rows of wide, quiet eyes. So the next time you see someone you think is beneath you, look again. They might just be carrying more than you can imagine. She stepped back from the mic. Silence. Then applause. It started slow like rain tapping on a window. Then louder, stronger, until the entire auditorium rose to its feet. A standing ovation. Kayla stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed. For the first time, they weren't seeing her as a janitor. They were seeing her as a human being. As a warrior. In her own right. As the sister of a hero. As a voice worth hearing. She stepped off the stage, heart pounding. And in that moment, the girl she used to be finally came home to the woman she had become. The applause echoed in Kayla's mind long after she stepped off stage, even hours later. While scrubbing chalk dust from the whiteboards in the math wing, she kept hearing it. Clapping hands, standing feet, wide eyes. She had never imagined that her story, the one she'd buried behind mop buckets and trash bags, could silence a room filled with hundreds of teenagers. But it had, and something had changed. That afternoon, as the final bell rang, students didn't rush past her like usual. Instead, they lingered. A tall senior one she remembered from the basketball team approached shyly. "Hey, that speech was real," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Like, I don't think I've ever heard something that made me think that hard." Kayla offered a small smile. "Thanks." Then another girl, Sarah, she thought her name was, stepped up behind him. "My cousin's in the Navy. I always thought I was the only one who really understood what it's like, waiting for them to come home." "You're not," Kayla said. That night, her inbox rarely touched since graduation started to fill. Former teachers, students, even strangers who had heard about the assembly from friends. Someone had recorded her speech and posted it online. By morning, it had already been shared dozens of times. The caption read, "She wears a janitor's uniform, but she carries a soldier's soul." Kayla stared at her phone, stunned. For years, she'd tried to fade into the background, hoping no one would notice how far from her dreams she had drifted. But now, they saw her, and not as a failure, but as something more. Even Principal Howard, who had once scolded her for mopping during morning announcements, stopped her in the hallway the next day. "I watched your speech last night," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "You reminded us all why we do what we do here." She didn't quite know how to respond, so she nodded. Then he surprised her. "I was wondering if you'd consider leading a veterans panel during the next parent-student night. There are a few kids here with military parents who don't talk about it. You might be the voice that helps them open up." Kayla hesitated. She was used to cleaning stages, not standing on them, but something inside her stirred. A small spark that had been buried under years of dust and disappointment. "Yeah?" she said slowly. "I'd like that." Later, when she got home, the house was louder than usual. Eva ran to her, waving a paper in the air. "My teacher showed your video to the whole class." She squealed. "She said you were a symbol of strength." "I told everyone. That's my sister." Kayla laughed, genuinely. "I hope you didn't exaggerate." Mateo chimed in from the kitchen, pouring cereal. "No need. You're kind of famous now." Kayla walked into her room, closed the door quietly, and sat at the edge of her bed. 4 years, she'd measured her success by what she didn't have: no degree, no campus dorm, no framed diploma. But now, for the first time, she saw something different in her reflection. She saw someone who had survived, who had chosen family over fame, who had protected her siblings, worked in silence, and still stood tall. She glanced at the photo of Luis on her dresser. His smile was as bright as ever, caught in that moment before he left for his final deployment. "I told your story, Luis," she whispered. "And I told mine too." The next day, a flyer was pinned up around school. "Real stories, real strength. Join our first military family meetup, led by Kayla Ramirez." She blinked when she saw her name printed in bold. Below, it was a photo of the tattoo. Not the full image, just the outline of the eagle. Wings outstretched. Students signed up fast. By the end of the week, nearly 30 kids had RSVP'd. Kids she never knew shared anything in common with her. One girl wrote a note on the sign-up sheet: "Thank you for being brave so the rest of us can speak." Kayla stood in front of the flyer for a moment, hand resting near her heart. Something had shifted, and not just in the students. It shifted in her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was rising. The next Friday, as she prepared for the meetup, she pulled her janitor's shirt from the hook and paused. Then, for the first time in months, she reached for something else. A button-down shirt, clean, crisp, not because she was ashamed of her uniform, but because she was stepping into a new role. One not defined by cleaning hallways, but by clearing the way for others to speak. The halls she once walked in silence were now filled with voices that had been waiting to rise, and she was leading the chorus. The school library had never been this full on a Friday afternoon. Rows of chairs were lined up in a semicircle, with the back wall cleared of book carts and clutter. The smell of paper and polished floors filled the air, but so did something else: anticipation, nervous energy, a soft kind of hope. At the front of the room stood a table with a small folded American flag, a single white candle, and a photo frame holding the image of a young man in uniform. SGT Luis Ramirez. Kayla placed the final paper down an agenda with simple words: "Welcome. Speak. Listen. Heal." She took a deep breath. This was happening. She wasn't here as a custodian today. She wasn't here as the girl who gave up Columbia. She was here because her story had made space for others, because she had spoken and others had heard. And now they wanted to speak too. One by one, students filed in, some she knew by name, others only by face. But each one wore something in common: the quiet posture of someone who had held something inside for too long. Malek was the first to sit in the front row. He offered her a fist bump, grinning. "Told you they'd come," Kyla chuckled. "You were right." Then came Sarah, the girl whose cousin served overseas. She had brought her younger brother with her. He clung to a small camouflage backpack as he sat beside her. Us, teacher from the English department, pulled up a chair in the back. Then another. Even the principal appeared, not to monitor or manage, but simply to listen. Kayla stood in front of them all, and for a second, the nerves returned. Her palms dampened, her mouth went dry, but then she caught a glimpse of her brothers. Photo his easy smile, the same one he wore before every family dinner, before every deployment. It steadied her. She spoke. Thank you all for being here. This started with a tattoo. A moment when people saw me differently, not as a janitor, but as someone with a story worth listening to. What I've learned since then is that everyone here has a story. Today is for that for stories. For silence turned into strength. The room stayed quiet, waiting. Then a hand rose shakily from the second row. It was Malik. He stood up slowly, cleared his throat. My sister was in the Marines, he said. She came back. Different, quieter, like she left part of herself behind. I never knew how to talk about it. But hearing Kayla made me feel like maybe I didn't have to have all the answers. I just had to care. Another voice joined. Sarah. Cousin stopped writing letters last year, she said softly. We used to talk every month. Now it's once every few. I thought maybe he forgot me. But now I think maybe he just doesn't know how to explain what he's going through. Kayla listened, her hands folded gently. This was why she'd spoken. Not to be admired, not for applause, but for this, to create space. More voices followed. One girl had lost a father in Iraq. Another boy's brother had just enlisted, and he was scared, but didn't want to admit it until now. Even a teacher stood up and shared how her own son had come back from war and never talked about it, but she wished she'd tried harder to understand. By the end of the hour, the room had changed, not in appearance, but in spirit. Walls that had once held silence now pulsed with connection. Stories that had been buried came out like sunlight through cracked earth. And at the center of it all,